This is the Behind the Line podcast, coming to you from the wacky left coast capital of Seattle. News from the Pacific Northwest, the left coast, the U.S., and the world that matters. The stories the MSM won't talk about. Deciphering the truth through all the lies. For more, visit BehindTheLinePodcast.com.
All right, well, the big news over the weekend, Iran attacks Israel, over 300 missiles and drones fired into the country, supposedly 99% interception rate, no fatalities. I've seen video of what appears to be 7 hypersonic missiles hitting a U.S. military installation. Not much about that in the media. In the regular media anyway. It also, let's just say, it took about 2 hours for American media to start reporting on this attack when it happened. I was seeing reports on social media and alternative media sites well before the American media decided to say anything. And on top of that, Hezbollah was firing missiles at Israel the day before. Reports varied on that attack from anywhere from 20 to 40 missiles that were fired, which was a very high number of missiles for Hezbollah. That was the largest Hezbollah attack yet since this war started. But there was nothing in the American media about that attack at all. Nothing. Only alternative media and social media had posts about that. This attack by Iran was the largest attack against Israel since the start of this war, maybe ever. I can't remember what they said now, but you got to wonder why the delay of reporting. Our media is so manipulated, it's absolutely ridiculous. And, 2 days before this, what did Biden say to Iran about attacking Israel? Don't. Well, why not? Because what are you going to do? Obviously, nothing. Immediately he tells Israel not to fight back, not to retaliate, consider it a win because all these missiles and drones were intercepted. It's not really the point, is it? Do you really think Iran is done? I don't. I don't think Israel's going to take his advice. I don't know that they'll retaliate right away. They've already said that it's going to be at a time and place of their choosing. So they've said that before when they were talking about invading the Strip, and it took a while for that to happen. So my guess is that it's going to take a while for them to retaliate. But as far as the rest of the world goes, where are the sanctions and anything else they could do to Iran that isn't military action? Why isn't that being done? There's been some talk about sanctions against their drone and missile program. Big deal. They're not buying their drones and missiles from NATO countries anyway. I seriously doubt they're getting that stuff from Russia and China, who aren't going to adhere to any sanctions. America's weakness is on display during this whole thing, as per usual. Status quo. They all know Biden is all talk, if there's any even talk about it, but there's definitely going to be no action, and everybody knows it. I'm honestly surprised China didn't take this opportunity to attack Taiwan. This stuff is coming. This is just the opening salvos of what will probably be World War III. And it's a slow roll, but it's going to happen. These other countries are going to take action. And if it looks like Biden's not going to be in office come November or January, then you can bet that these countries are going to take whatever action they want to take before then, because they'll want to do it while Biden is in office, because they know he's weak and can't make decisions and probably won't respond in kind to anything they do. He'll sit there and say that he'll back a nation, but when push comes to shove, he doesn't. He finds excuses why he shouldn't, doesn't do what he's going to say he's going to do, there's no follow-through. America is no longer feared on the world stage. I hope you're preparing for that day, because time is running out. All right, here's some news out of Missouri, a red conservative, very conservative state, one of the most conservative states in the country. And I want to talk about this bill that they're trying to pass there. I believe it's House Bill 227. It's in regards to homeschooling. And what they're wanting to do is reclassify your home, if you homeschool, as a school. Which, this is being pushed by conservative representatives. And I don't know what the purpose is of this reclassification, or what their justification is, or how they're trying to sell it. What I do know is that a lot of people are talking about, and one prominent lawyer has written a 6-page brief on this law, that if it passes and you homeschool your kids and you keep firearms in your house, that they can charge you with a felony for having firearms in a quote-unquote school. Which means they could come take your firearms, arrest you, search your house, take your kids. Who knows what they could do with this legislation. It doesn't say anything about this specifically, but if you read into the way it's written, and like I said, this prominent lawyer that's written a brief says that this would absolutely allow them to do that. And they're modeling it off legislation out of California and a couple other, I believe, Illinois and New York. Now, why is a conservative state modeling laws after these deeply liberal blue states? What is the purpose of that? And I believe 3 other states in the U.S. already have legislation on the books similar to this. And maybe you don't live in Missouri, but I live in Washington, and I'm surprised Washington hasn't pulled some law like this. Maybe we do have a law like this, I don't know. But you've got all these states that are going after guns right now, and here's just another example, another step that they can take to take your guns away or make it so you can't have guns in your own home. There's a lot of people turning to homeschool because of the school system in every state, not just red states. And so this is just another form of control over you and your household. This is something everybody should be paying attention to, because if they can pass this in a deep red state, then you can bet other states will follow suit, especially ones that are liberal or lean more liberal that aren't so conservative. We've got to be on the lookout for these laws that have all these hidden agendas written by some weasel that, can hide the true nature of these laws and the true intentions of these laws, and just how far-reaching these laws can be because of the way they're written. Here's another problem that we're seeing nationwide in a lot of these big blue cities. Seattle Police Department, down to 497 officers. This is less officers than they had in 1957. Full staffing, I believe, is around 1,500 officers, so they are well below half of where they should be, which means it's taking longer for calls for service. You're not getting any proactive patrol work because no one would be available for that, because they've got to respond to calls for service 280 of those officers are eligible for retirement, which just puts them at a very dangerous level. Of those officers, 81 are on the HR unavailable list, meaning they're off work for 2 weeks or more for various reasons, medical reasons, whatever. So that takes it down even lower. Hiring cannot keep up with separations. And you can figure for about every one open position they have, if a background investigators are doing their job, then you're probably going to take 8 to 10 people to fill every one vacancy. You're probably looking at anywhere from 20 to 40 hours per applicant to complete a background check. So you do the math on those hundreds of openings, how many hundreds of hours you're talking about to complete a background check and get somebody hired, and then put them through the academy, which I believe is 6 months. And then you've got on-the-job field training, which is anywhere from 6 months to 1 year before an officer is on their own. How long is it going to take to get people on the road? Nobody wants to go work there. You're not going to get any laterals because nobody's going to go there because of the way the attitude and the way the city council treats its police. You're talking about years to get that department back up to staff, if that's even possible. Other precincts are having to cover other precincts, so leaving their precinct open. They're not working at minimum staffing levels. It's not safe. It's not safe for you. It's not safe for the officers. These guys are being inundated with workloads that are untenable. Property crime, burglary, and larceny or theft have hit record highs in recent years. Motor vehicle theft in 2023 hit 9,175, the highest since 2008. The last publicly available date for records. Juvenile crime has also surged during the same time period, yet there are only 13 total sworn police officers and 2 sergeants who cover the burglary, theft, and juvenile unit across the entire department. Only 9 are working with the General Investigation Squad, and only 1 is under the Auto Theft Department. Reported bias incidents have also hit record highs in the last 3 years, and there's only 1 officer in the bias crimes unit. Seattle PD officers are getting old. Most alarming is the number of aging officers who are eligible for retirement. Inclusive of the entire SPD, including specialty and HR's unavailable list, there are 280 staff available or eligible to retire based on age and tenure. Both the West and North precincts have the most eligible for retirement at 23 each. The average age of staff eligible for retirement is 55. The oldest officer is 72 with the burglary, theft, and juvenile department. If even a fraction of these officers retire in 2024, the department would struggle to function. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And if they haven't already, you can guarantee they're going to stop responding to any calls for service other than in progress, violent calls for service. You'll have to file police reports online, you'll have to report crimes online, and you will get nothing, no response from the police department at all, just like we're seeing in some of these other cities. Philadelphia, places in Texas. They just can't keep up. Seattle police are trying to pass a new contract that would make them the highest paid department in the state. They've worked without a contract for nearly 3 years, which is just disgusting that the city won't sign a contract with its police department for that long. Absolutely ridiculous. Dereliction of duty when it comes to those city council members and the mayor, quite frankly. But the other side of that is, even if you're getting paid the most in the state, do you want to go work for some shithole where you're treated like total garbage? You've got the city council and mayor's office and office of police accountability and all this other crap they have going on there, investigating their officers and looking for any reason to fire them, prosecute them? I don't think so. I don't think the money's worth it. And obviously, they don't have the staffing, and that just goes to prove the point. It's not worth it. You've got businesses making a mass exodus from the city because of crime and the lack of the city to take action against it. You've got this police force that's pathetic, that can't do its job because of the city government. When is this city council and mayor's office going to wake up and take some action? When are they going to address these issues? When are they going to do something for the taxpayers, not just the down and outs of the city? This is just the same old story in so many big cities across this country, blue cities especially, but it's not just limited to those. These cities are more concerned about spending your money on homeless people and drug addicts and decriminalizing crime. It's disgusting what these politicians have done to this country, and we just keep voting them back into office for whatever reason. Our bleeding hearts, I guess. At the same time, they take action to make you a criminal, to make it more difficult for you to defend yourself, to carry a firearm. There's no police to protect you. They're not going to let you protect yourself either. Why do we keep allowing this? Why do we put up with this? Washington's magazine ban, which is a ban of any magazine that holds more than 10 rounds, was recently overturned by a Collins County judge who determined the law was unconstitutional, no kidding. And within a few hours, a stay was enacted by the Attorney General who got this law put into effect. The stay was issued by a Supreme Court commissioner. His name is Michael Johnson. Now, commissioners with the Washington Supreme Court actually have the same authority as a judge, and this guy's job is to screen all the cases that come in to see if he can screen them out or deal with them before a judge, the Supreme Court actually has to, which is fine, except this was a 50 or 60 page argument against this law, and he issued this stay within like an hour and a half, and there's no way he read that motion the judge made out of Cowlitz County declaring it to be an unconstitutional law. There's no way he actually reviewed it and then issued the stay. No, this was put in place by Sideshow Bob well ahead of time because he knew it was coming. And they had agreed that this stay would be put into place as soon as that judge issued his ruling. Just like everything else that the state government does, it's corrupt. It was the fastest stay issued in Washington state history. Well, what does that tell you? And also, I did some digging on this Michael Johnson guy. He used to work for the Attorney General's office. So you've got that, too. So this whole case is going to get a rehearing in court. The stay will be in effect, so you still can't buy a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. Who knows if it'll make its way up to the Washington Supreme Court. Even if it does, it's going to be a very tough sell because these guys are all liberals and they're all on board with Inslee and Bob Ferguson to limit our rights, limit guns, whatever they can do to take away your rights. So This law probably has no hope of ever being reversed, even though it is absolutely unconstitutional and ridiculous, and it's not doing anything to save lives. Typical for Washington State. Here's an interesting story about the Federal Reserve's doomsday book and the vast amount of power claimed by the central bank. After years of speculation, the Federal Reserve has released its so-called doomsday book, an internal document that outlines the vast power the central bank can claim during times of financial emergency. The doomsday book was recently released by the Fed in response to a Freedom of Information Act filed by finance professor Emery Cuvette. Bizarrely, the Federal Reserve initially denied Cuvette's FOIA request, but its New York branch later provided the document with only names redacted. The Doomsday Book reportedly shows that the Federal Reserve claims powers that far exceed what's explicitly authorized by Congress. Instead of adhering strictly to clear legislative boundaries to justify its actions during financial crises, the central bank appears to ground many of its decisions in New York Fed's belief in the Fed's discretionary authority, Cuvette wrote last December in the Wall Street Journal. It relies on precedent for many of its actions without explicit congressional authorization in some instances. Indeed, on page 33 of the book, an anonymous author in the book wrote that the powers of a Federal Reserve Bank are far greater than is commonly supposed. For instance, the Doomsday Book documents how the Fed claims to have the power to bail out cities or even to take ownership of companies, Cuvette wrote. The book shows that some at the Federal Reserve take a more conservative viewpoint about the central bank's powers, but over time it has gradually taken a more activist viewpoint. Cuvette wrote that he hopes the Doomsday Book might spur Congress to consider constraining the Fed, but given that the central bank has already claimed so much power, doing so might prove difficult, he said. Establishing clear legislative boundaries for the Fed might be a futile endeavor because the central bank, or at least the legal team at its dominant member bank, apparently believes it can rely on precedent to justify virtually any emergency action, he said. While the Doomsday Book has been the subject of intrigue, critics of the Federal Reserve said it simply confirms what they already knew. The Doomsday Book confirms what many Austrians and libertarians have said about the nature of government in crises. The size and scope of the Fed is stretched even beyond its known boundaries, and then it never returns to its pre-crisis state, wrote economist Jonathan Newman for the Mises Institute. The precedents are set in an ad hoc way and then codified ex post. We're left with a Leviathan. Isn't that nice to know that our government will just turn it over to the bankers if there's a financial crisis? And the financial crisis looks pretty promising, doesn't it? We have record debt in this country, record credit card debt, record government debt, business debt, household debt, car debt, every kind of debt you can want to have. We have an excessive, unrepayable amount of. There is no way the trillions of dollars that we're in debt can ever be paid in the next several generations. All of these things are coming to a head. The economic situation in this country, the war outlook for this country and the rest of the world. And the rest of the world, frankly, is under the central bank's control as well, because they all fall victim to needing the central bank. They've all given the central bank these powers, all the countries. The future seems rather bleak. I hope you are preparing accordingly. All right, well, yesterday was April 15th, tax day. Did you file an extension? Did you get your taxes done on time? Are you being a good little citizen, a good little slave, and paying the government whatever extra money that you had? I don't know about you, but I work my ass off all year, and yet at the end of that year, I still owe money. Even with all the exemptions they claim to give us, a $25,000 household exemption, the child tax credit, even with that, I still owe them money. Oh. All we do is pay this government. Taxes in everything we do, taxes on everything we buy, taxes on our paychecks. You work hard all week, and you get your paycheck, and the government takes their chunk, and at the end of the year, they decide that you still need to pay more. We are all slaves to this government, and this is how they do it now. There's no chains. There's no master at your house, per se. But the government is your master. The government takes more than their fair share from you to keep you poor, to keep you from being able to enjoy any of your time, to make sure that you've got plenty of bills to take up the rest of whatever money you made at whatever meager wage you're working for. Meanwhile, these corporations and government entities get all the breaks, all the tax money, all the tax breaks. And what does the government do with your money that they take? They give it to people who don't work. And isn't it interesting? And I've known many people who don't work, or they're on assistance or whatever, and somehow at the end of the year they're getting $5,000, $8,000 back. How is that? How is that if you don't work, you're getting anything back from the government? This is wealth transfer. This is taking from the middle class to make you poor and giving it to the poor people to keep them poor. Why do we put up with this? Why do we pay this government anything more? They waste our money. They give it to foreign governments. They don't protect the citizens of this country. They don't protect our country. They don't protect our rights. Why do we put up with this? Why are we willingly being slaves to this government? Think about that.
Thanks for listening to the Behind the Line podcast. For more, visit behindthelinepodcast.com, leftcoastnews.net, or shtf.net. You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, and anywhere else podcasts are found. Please subscribe, like, and share to get our content out there. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, Truth Social, Gab, Telegram, Substack, Brighteon, Rumble, the Newscaster Studio, and all other forms of social media. Thanks for listening.